Good afternoon and welcome back. And this is our 35th annual Texas United Methodist Women Legislative event. I think it's my 20th, something like that. So yay for us, yay for us. Now, as she said, my name is Darlene Alfred. For those of you that have been attending this event for years, you will notice this lovely item around my neck. It goes back so many years, nobody even remembers how many years. We believe it's back towards the beginning. But for those of you who have been coming for a while, you remember Miss Rose Watson. And she is the reason we have this boa. And this boa has been like the mascot that we never had for the United Methodist Women. It has been on the silent auction for years. The rule is you bid high, you take it home, you bring it back the next year, because all the funds that are raised for the silent auction go towards our scholarship fund. So if you're not sure if the bow is for you, let me show you that it is for everyone and anyone. You can wear it when you're casual, you can wear it when you're dressed for a night on the town, you can wear it for an intimate dinner at home, you can wear it to the beach. Imagine what it would cover up if that two-piece isn't looking the way you wanted it to. But this boa can be yours at the silent auction. Now, for those who are online who are not here to bid on the silent auction, we're going to find a way for you to donate funds just because you wish you could be here and you can't, but you don't want to miss out on the fun with the boa. Now, for an added bonus, for a small donation of $10, you can wear the boa for the duration of the event. You may not win it because there will be a bid higher than that. But for $10, if that's what you wanted to give, you can donate the $10 now, and you could wear it for the duration of the event. So who wants to wear it for the duration of the event? Don't everyone raise their hands at once, because we want to get this $10 donation in now. So watch me as I tell you. We have a winner. I am going to ask the winner to come forward so I can give it to him so he can wear it for the duration of the event. Let's give it up for Chuck Reeves. He is probably one of the official United Methodist women who aren't women in this room. So, sir, I give you the boa. And don't forget about the $10. Thank you, ladies. Have a great rest of the afternoon.
All right, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Paul Martin, and let me just say, I am introducing Paul Martin on behalf of Beeman Floyd. Beeman Floyd's going to be speaking to you tonight. He's going to be on Zoom because he tested positive for COVID, and so we're wishing him a speedy recovery. But he sent me this introduction to our next speaker, who is a good friend of Beeman's and a friend of this organization as well. Paul Martin is a lawyer by training with expertise in a wide range of insurance law. Paul is also a well-respected public policy expert working in Texas, as well as a variety of other legislative venues. But most importantly, says Beeman, Paul is a reliable, joyfully prepared colleague with whom it's always a pleasure to work, no matter how difficult the issue. He's going to be talking about some difficult issues, so it's lucky that he is joyful and reliable. Welcome, Paul Martin.
So, just curious, and be honest, when you saw the agenda that we would be talking about insurance on a Sunday afternoon, how many of you got excited? Maybe one. Okay, we're going to add this young lady to our prayer list because that's probably not normal, but that's okay. Thank you so much. Great opportunity to speak with you. I feel blessed. I have been in prayer for all of you, for your organizers since Friday night, hoping the Holy Spirit comes and opens our hearts and minds as we discuss these issues, all the issues that you're discussing. And B tells me that this event started in 1988. That is the year I graduated from high school. So you can date how old I am. as a result of that. I thought I would start by sharing some of my own United Methodist bona fides. This is the church in which I grew up. This is the First United Methodist Church of Shelbyville, Tennessee. This is about an hour southeast of Nashville in a small community where I grew up. As a result of being in a rural community, I was very active in the 4-H project, and because of my work in 4-H, I was asked to work on a number of projects for our church, including what we used to call Heifer Project International, which is now just Heifer International. We would do fundraisers for them. Also, Soil Stewardship Week. Now, this was the 80s, so we weren't as in tune with conservation and the environment perhaps as we are now. This was a rural community, but this was something that our church started to initiate and make part of our curriculum moving forward, was to talk about stewardship, not just of the environment, but the soil in particular, because this was a very agricultural community. We had a lot of farmers in our congregation, so that was something I worked on. This was known as the church on the square. And across the street from the church was the county courthouse, and at the top of the county courthouse was a clock. And that clock chimed on the hour. And every time we had a new pastor come to the church, there was an onboarding process with lay leadership, and they'd say, "Pastor, here's the deal. We do one show at 10:55 a.m. If that clock strikes noon and we're still in service, we're going to have a problem. First of all, we don't want to be here longer than noon. And secondly, the Baptists will beat us to the restaurants. We don't like losing to the Baptists in the church softball league or the church basketball league, and we certainly don't want to lose to them in the race to the restaurants." So that was a standing order. And I can remember as a kid, I was in high school, and we had a pastor who decided we needed to have a capital campaign. I don't remember what the project was for. And at the very front of the sanctuary, he had brought up a big poster board. It had a thermometer on it, and instead of degrees, it was dollars. And so we began passing the plate to raise money one Sunday. The clock struck noon. The organist still played. Methodists became restless. The music continued. The plate passed some more, and we finally hit whatever goal the pastor had in mind. A few months later, at the annual conference, the church decided to trade this pastor on another draft pick. So that's what happens. The clock strikes, and you're still talking. That's a problem. Right? So I'm going to speak to you today about climate change, what the insurance industry, how we perceive it. I work for the Reinsurance Association of America. I will refer to it as the RAA. We represent reinsurers doing business here in the United States. Some of them are based here in the United States. Some of them are based globally. We promote two things: a globally competitive and a financially robust reinsurance market. Paul, what is reinsurance? Reinsurance is simply insurance for insurance companies. The companies that you do business with for auto and for homeowners, State Farm USA, Liberty Mutual, Allstate, Nationwide, Farm Bureau, whoever, many of them buy reinsurance for those major catastrophic events: earthquakes, wildfires, hurricanes. So that if there is a very large loss, there's another pool of assets, of resources they can pull into to help keep them financially strong. The reinsurance market taps into funds globally. Investors invest in reinsurance. They get to diversify their portfolio. In return, insurance companies get access to capital, which enables them to pay those claims in catastrophic situations, and it enables insurance companies to offer more insurance at more affordable rates. If insurance companies were not able to buy reinsurance, they would have to change their business model. Their business model may include not writing as much insurance in certain communities, in certain parts of the state, if they thought it was too risky to do so, and it may have an impact on rates as well. So by injecting more capital, more global capital into the marketplace, we're able to create more insurance products and create a more affordable insurance market. Is insurance compatible with the Bible? For your sakes, I hope it is, because your church is selling it. It's going to be very problematic. You get to heaven and say, "Oh, Methodist, oh yeah, you're that church that sold insurance. Yeah, that's our problem." No, the United Methodist Insurance Program. Highly encourage you, if you have not checked it out, highly encourage you to go to their website. On the Activities tab, select Safety. There's a lot of really good information there. It's a wealth of information that even if you're not Methodist, you can go and figure out ways to reduce the risk of your church. Churches face all sorts of risk right now, and not just storms. It's also, counseling and everything else, and taking care of child care, those sorts of things. Lots of great ideas and information there. Highly encourage you to check it out. We can go into the Proverbs and read that the prudent person sees the danger and prepares for it, and the simpleton ignores it and faces the consequences. If you believe that buying insurance is prudent, I bet the United Methodist Insurance Program employees would tell you it is. If you believe that buying is imprudent, then we need a robust marketplace to sell us this prudent product. And that's one of the things that we work on at the REA. So I want to talk a little bit about the environment that we see. There are three things I want to talk to you about here. The first is a climate needing more stewardship. This statement that you see on your screen, this is part of our RAA climate change policy. You can go to our website, reinsurance.org. We have all sorts of statements on various issues. We have a whole section devoted to climate change. We believe that climate is changing and that humans have an impact on it, and it's because of carbon emission. We also believe that it is increasing the frequency and severity of losses, of storms, of wildfires. And as a result, we are paying for it in our insurance. We see a climate that is in more need of property mitigation. There are a couple of studies here noted. Both of these are from FEMA. Depending on what study you read, for every dollar we spend on mitigation, we save $4 or $6. I've seen some estimates as high as $11. Now, to be clear, mitigation doesn't fix the climate, but it allows us to endure it while we transition to the next phase, right? We're not going to be able to fix climate tomorrow, otherwise we would have already done it. But we're going to continue to have these weather patterns. We're going to continue to have storms and floods and wildfire. We need to be building communities that are more resilient, in large part so we can quit spending so much money. Disaster recovery is really expensive. I've heard one estimate that for every dollar that we get to hand out into the community, either a direct payment or for assistance, it costs $3 just to deliver it. It's really expensive to do this. And those are funds, those are tax dollars we could be using on a wide variety of projects, but we're having to use it on disasters, and we're having to spend more and more money because these disasters become more and more common. The third thing we see is a climate becoming more expensive to insure. Munich Re. Munich Re is a reinsurer. They're one of our member companies. At the end of the year, they issued a report saying that there were $280 billion in losses in 2021. About 120 of that was actually insured. Second highest amount of insured losses on record, 2017 being the number one year. 120 billion in insured losses in a year. Hurricane Ida, just down the road from us on I-10 in Louisiana, $65 billion loss this year. Now, I did some quick back of the napkin math. Hurricane Ida was about 25% of that global loss, one storm. Winter Storm Uri, about $10 billion. All these losses accumulate, and we want insurance to pay for it. That's why we pay a premium. We want the insurance industry to pay for it. We're able to do that. The problem as we see it is that if you believe that climate change is real, if it's causing more storms, it's causing more severe storms, it's going to require more and more insurance funds to pay these claims to get us back to where we were. So what can we take from this? Our industry continues to be impacted. And so it's interesting when people come to us to talk to us about climate change and we say, you know what, we've seen this for decades. When we first started seeing the trend that we're paying more for losses and we're seeing more losses, we're seeing more events, we didn't initially, decades ago, tie it to climate change, but now we know, right? So we've been seeing this. Insurance is a very data-driven industry. There are thousands of people who sit in cubicles pre-pandemic, now they do this from home, and just stare into monitors all day and look at spreadsheets and look at data, trying to figure out what this is going to cost us. What is this storm going to cost us? What is the next hurricane season going to cost us? If California doesn't get rain soon, what is that going to cost us in terms of wildfire? Around Christmas time, we had 1,000 homes destroyed in one fire in Colorado. 1,000 people made 1,000 homes gone. probably 4,000 or 5,000 people made homeless just like that. And now all those people are going to be competing for builders, for lumber, for construction, for labor. So it creates these synergies where the problem gets bigger and bigger anytime you have a massive disaster like this. Regulators across the country are becoming more interested in how we, our industry, are preparing for this. And this is one of the conversations that we're having with them. Regulators have a number of jobs. One of their top jobs is to make sure that insurance companies stay solvent, that they can actually pay claims during a disaster. And one of the conversations we're having is, how much information do you need to determine whether or not we're staying solvent, and how much is this you trying to affect a political change, a climate change? So some of the things I'm going to talk to you about in the next few minutes, some of those things you're going to say, I agree with that. I like that. Some of the things I'm going to say, you may say, yeah, I don't like that. That doesn't make me happy to hear that. Rest assured that our message to this audience is the same as we would give to the Chamber of Commerce, and it's the same as we would give to a Tea Party organization. Our job is to tell you what we are seeing. We are a data-driven industry, and we see where the data is taking us, and we want you to be aware of that so that you can participate in the public policy process as well. So what should insurers do about climate change? I mentioned earlier, we've been out front on this for decades, in large part because we've seen the data, we see what's going on, and we have to respond to regulators. Who can tell me the government agency that regulates what grocery stores charge for milk and for macaroni and for baby formula? Who's that state agency? Who's the state agency that regulates what gas stations charge for gasoline and diesel? That's a trick question. There ain't one. There ain't one. There is a Texas Department of Insurance to which every insurance company submits its rates, and by law, and this is pretty much the law in 50 states, insurance rates cannot be excessive, too much, inadequate, too little, or unfairly discriminatory. There's a whole agency devoted to regulating our industry. And what they see is they look at the information that we submit, and so we have to justify to the government what we are charging. And it's scrutinized by accountants, by actuaries, to make sure that we're meeting the statutory requirements. So I'm going to submit that our industry needs to be doing three things, continue to be doing three things as we move forward on this. First and foremost is to provide financial resources to recover from losses. When the storm comes to your community, you want people to have reliable insurance to rebuild your homes, your schools, your hospitals, so that you can still continue to have public health, you can continue to have infrastructure, public education, you can continue to have a tax base. Insurance companies need to be able to continue to do that job. Now, everyone likes to hear that, right? Insurance companies paying claims, making us whole, we like to hear that. This next point may cause you a little pain. In order to do that, we have to have money in the bank. We have to have the assets to write those checks. So we have to be able to charge an actuarially sound rate. Now, we're going to put a pin in this, and I'll come back to it in a couple of slides. But I want to tell you now, if you think this is just an insurance industry talking point, I called one of the deputy commissioners at the Louisiana Department of Insurance on Friday to talk about Hurricane Ida. Not one, not two, but 3 insurance companies went insolvent because of Hurricane Ida. And why did they go insolvent, Paul? According to the department, not my point, according to the Department of Insurance, they did not charge enough premium for the risk they were taking on. And that's a problem. By the way, if that happens and that company requires a bailout, who pays for that? There's something called the Guarantee Fund in pretty much every state. And there's a fund of money there to pay those claims for insolvent insurance companies. Then the Guarantee Fund turns around and assesses all the other insurance companies who were solvent. That works its way into your rates. So that's how that works. So Our industry has a vested interest in making sure that everybody else has got plenty of assets and is doing a good job of pricing their product, because we don't want to be the ones having to write the check if we're doing it right. Does that seem fair? Research, this is point number 2, research and encourage risk reduction. Our industry spends tens of millions of dollars every year in an organization called the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, IBHS. Sometime when you're trying to sleep at night, you get tired of watching cat videos, Google IBHS and go to their website and watch some of the videos. They have a massive lab. It looks like a major hangar for airplanes. And simulate wildfires. They can simulate hailstorms, hurricanes, and they build mock-ups of houses. And they'll build 2 houses identical side by side, one with good enhanced building practices and one with standard practices, and then they will blow 100-mile-an-hour winds at it, or they'll try to set them on fire, or whatever the project of the day is. Our industry spends tens of millions of dollars in this project annually, and they take the science from that, the engineering practices, the best practices, and they give it away to the public for free. You can download best practices on how to build a house or how to retrofit your house using enhanced building practices to make your home more resilient. We're going to have to continue to fund this because we have seen examples of this. Hurricane Michael hit the Florida Panhandle in 2017, I believe it was, and it was a massive hurricane. You didn't hear much about it because it hit a relatively unpopulated part of the state. And they were looking at satellite photos, and they saw this hurricane where it came across, and it destroyed all these homes in this one neighborhood, except for 3. And they started looking at these 3 homes. All these homes were destroyed, except for 3 homes. And they said, what was it about these 3 homes? So they went and they started investigating it. These homes were built to IBHS standards. Here's the really interesting thing about that. These homes were built to IBHS standards by Habitat for Humanity. People like me who have a hard time nailing a nail, who have no business building anything, volunteers at we're going to do a build day for, we don't know what we're doing, but there'll be somebody there to show us. Volunteers built homes that survived the hurricane where professional contractors, professional laborers didn't get it done. That's how well this stuff works. So when you're doing if you're doing one of these builds, you may very well be working on an IBHS approved home. So think about that. In the community, floodplain management, building code enforcement. We need to start thinking about enforcing building codes and doing a better job of building codes. Now, I have friends at the Builders Association at the Capitol. We are friends. They adamantly oppose us on this. They say building codes, the ones we have now, are good enough. And I get that. They're struggling because there's massive demand for housing in this state, right? And we want people to have affordable housing, no doubt. At the same time, we've got to build so that the next time we have a storm, the house doesn't get knocked down, right? This is the one you may struggle with me a little bit, and that's okay. We need to set insurance prices to reflect the true cost of the risk. I can summarize this entire presentation in 30 seconds. If you believe in climate change, if you think it's real, if you think climate change is making storms and wildfires more common and more intense, and if you think insurance companies should pay for those things, the logical conclusion is that the insurance companies then need to make sure they are pricing that accurately and reflecting that. And it doesn't matter the net worth of the individual living in that house. If you build a beach house, and when I say a beach house, I'm talking about where there's sand and ocean in your backyard, it doesn't matter whether your net worth is $5,000 or $5 million. If you're building a home if there's a home in a floodplain, and maybe it's in a part of town that's economically disadvantaged, it doesn't matter whether your net worth is $5,000 or $5 million. it's going to cost society X to insure that. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't think of and try to come up with other public policy initiatives to address the problems in that community, the challenges in that community. Not saying that. We're just telling you we need to be able to price this so that everyone knows that if you build a house in this floodplain, it costs X. And if you're going to build a house, a beach house on the sand, it costs Y to insure it. We all need transparency. We all need to be able to see that. So I think it was the 2016 presidential campaign, there was something called whataboutism. And you weren't allowed to say, but what about? Because that was bad. And I think that's kind of silly. We should always be saying what about. We should be saying what about everything so that we get to the right public policy. So invariably what some people want to say to us in the insurance industry is, but shouldn't insurers just stop insuring fossil fuel, generation, extraction? Shouldn't you just stop that? And if we just stopped it, those industries would just go away, and then we'd have clean energy, right? You may have thought this yourself. We refer to that as part of the transition risk. If we stop insuring coal, if we stop insuring oil, if we stop insuring miners, if we stop insuring plants, energy plants that use these to generate electricity, we don't have any electricity right now. We have to come up with a way so that we continue to provide insurance for those necessary operations as we migrate to a cleaner energy development system. And a lot of people don't see it that way. I assure you, you want industries that are digging up coal and are extracting oil from the earth and are using this to create and refining and whatever. You want those entities to have insurance, because what happens if something goes wrong? And there's damage to the environment, there's damages to homes, there's damages to people from an accident. You want those folks to have insurance so that there's some assets there to take care of those people and fix things after a disaster. It's going to take us a while to get there, but we need to be thinking long term and come up with a strategy so that we have these fossil fuel plants, if you will, these thermal, use whatever term you want. We have these entities in place generating the electricity and the resources we need now until we transition to something else. So, what are we doing as reinsurers to help? This is one thing I'm really excited about. It's called community-based catastrophe insurance. Community-based catastrophe insurance. And some of our member companies are experimenting with this. It's a relatively new concept whereby a community can buy an insurance policy for all of its citizens. Now, it may not be a policy that pays all of their damages if there's a flood or if there's a windstorm, but it would provide something, right? So it's a way to help those people who have no insurance have at least some policy in effect. And it's our industry that's pioneering this, the reinsurance industry that's pioneering this, putting capital in this, and we're starting to see it work. I think there's one entity doing this in the New York area. We've talked, some of our members have talked to folks in other states. There are communities that want to implement this. And this is something that our industry is really excited about because we think this may address what we often refer to as the insurance gap. Some people don't have insurance, right? We think this may be a way to at least address part of that. Continuing to advocate for IBHS and similar mitigation technologies, and then making sure that our industry, the reinsurers, are there and financially capable of backstopping those other insurance companies who buy reinsurance when they have that large loss, that next hurricane, that next wildfire. So let's talk about Texas. That's the most important state. What do we face here? No, nothing surprising here. We have just about everything. We do have earthquakes not on the list. We do have earthquakes. We are not as at risk for earthquakes as people in California or the New Madrid area in Missouri, but these are the big ones. And our industry pays a lot of money every year in Texas as a result of claims. We have to be financially available and ready to do so. And that's one of the challenges we face. Here are some stats on just doing business in Texas. We have a lot of hail claims historically. We have a lot of beach houses compared to other states with coastal lines. We have a lot of severe weather. We spend a lot of money in claims every year in a normal claim year. And if there's a hurricane on top of that, that number goes up exponentially. One of the few states where we can have a hurricane and a wildfire in the same state going on at the same time. People are like, wow, that's tough living in Texas. I'm like, yeah, it's just, whatever. That's why you don't live here. We can take it, you can't, right? What do we do as stewards? Our industry is the 6th largest taxpayer in the state. Your schools, your roads, your sewers, your water treatment plants are largely financed by the insurance industry buying your municipal bonds. We employ a lot of people with green jobs. Insurance jobs typically have really good benefits, health insurance, 401ks, leave policies. We're doing our part in Texas to keep the state strong. And so what is our ask of you? And I don't mean just you as United Methodist. I was going to say women, but then there was a guy wearing a boa. I'm like, oh, man, I don't know. And he's not wearing the boa. You need to put, okay, thank you. I feel better now. Very good. What is our ask? This would be our ask of anybody. I'm going to share 5 things with you really quick. First, we need to continue to encourage investment in the Texas insurance market. Simply put, the more insurance companies we have doing business in Texas, that creates more policies, that creates more competition, that creates lower premiums for all of us. I don't like buying insurance either. It's expensive. I've got a house, I've got a car, those sorts of things. I don't particularly enjoy buying insurance, right? What I know is if the industry decides that, for whatever reason, Texas is becoming too challenging of a state to do business in, insurance companies stop writing as many policies here, and that's a problem for us. Continue to encourage investment in infrastructure. Now, I specifically refer to physical infrastructure because we see infrastructure proposals coming out of Washington, and I'm reading, I'm like, okay, that ain't infrastructure. I'm talking physical things we can look at and see that are going to reduce the risk of damage to homes and to communities, where we make adjustments to floodplains, where we build barrier walls to prevent storm surge in communities. And then come up with ways to protect the future as well. More floodplain planning, better building codes. We know this stuff works. My wife and I built a house to IBHS standards 5 years ago. The total increase in the price of the house was about 2%. So when you do the mortgage, it comes out to pennies a day to live in a house that's a lot stronger for storms than just simply being built to code. We need to follow the science. We need to follow the natural science, but we also need to follow the actuarial science. If there are places in states that are riskier in terms of providing insurance, we need to price that properly so that when there is a storm, when there is a wildfire, there's money to pay the claims in your community. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. They want to hear, yes, make the insurance companies, make them lower their prices and provide more coverage. Well, as a consumer, that sounds great until you're insured by one of those companies who does that and becomes insolvent after a loss, after a storm. We don't want that. Encourage better building codes and enforcement. The Disaster Recovery Reform Act, any state, this was an act passed by Congress a few years ago, any state that has a good building code that enforces it is entitled to more funds, federal disaster dollars, after a disaster. Good luck explaining to Texas legislators why we should do this. I've had that conversation, and basically what I get back from a lot of them is we should be able to build what we want, where we want, and not have the government tell us how to do it. Right? And so in my personal life, I'm fairly libertarian, and so I kind of sort of get that. Here's the problem. Good building codes keep my roof out of your living room, keeps it out of your street, keeps it out of your landfill, and keeps my house on your tax rolls so that your community doesn't take a hit in tax revenue the next year. So when we build stronger, and we build these communities, and we build new communities, and we do it to a stronger standard, we're making those homes stronger. We're making those homes safer. We're preserving the community. We're protecting that family, physically protecting that family, literally protecting that family inside of it. And finally, something that's not necessarily related to climate change, but it kind of sort of is, and it is something that I advocate for in my personal life, is that we need you in your churches and in your communities being personally prepared for disasters. I reached out to my church during the winter storm and said, what's our plan? What are we going to do to help people? And they said, we don't have a plan. Really? Because as Christians, we need to be doing that. That's what we do. We need to be opening up our houses of worship and showing people that we care about the people in our community. And if we're going to talk about we need to do this, make this investment, make our community stronger, we need to be walking the walk in our own personal lives as well. And we need to be ready to be able to have our affairs at home squared away, which means we have food and water stored up. We have a way to heat our house, a way to charge our phones if the power is out, so that we can help our communities in that rebuilding process that follows every single disaster. I want to take you back to that story about the pastor who held us over. That's a true story. But I think there's a parable in there as well. In that parable, we are all the pastors. The congregation is the population of Texas. And as pastors, I would submit to you that we all, regardless if you do this for a living like I do, or if you do it as a volunteer for a cause or causes that you believe passion, doesn't matter whether you're getting paid to do it or not. As the pastors, should be stewards, good stewards of the public policy process, meaning we look at all the data, we hear all the viewpoints, and we try to come up with a way, as Proverbs 15 would tell us, with many counselors comes success. That success in Texas comes when we take in all the viewpoints and chart a path forward that works for everyone. God bless you. I'll try to answer any questions.
I'll work this way. Okay, sorry.
Shall I start?
You shall start.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough. What you did not discuss is anything to influence climate change. Are we just going to accept that? No, it's going to happen. It's going to get worse. Or should we be encouraging people to do things to slow down climate change? And could your industry do things, incentives such as reduced insurance rates on electric or hybrid cars, maybe a good rate on insuring your solar panels if you put those in? Are there other things that you could do to look at that side of it too?
So let's take the second half of that question first. I mentioned that we are a data-driven industry. And so we have to look at the data in terms of pricing to see if it makes sense to offer those discounts. It may be at some point we reach the conclusion that it does. At the same time, we have to maintain our solvency. And so there's always, initiatives, and it's all sorts of things, not just necessarily climate. If there is data to back up a discount, then the industry will naturally migrate to it because you will demand it, you will expect it, right? But there's always going to be initiatives, well, gee, it would be great if you got a discount for this, or it'd be great if you get a discount for that. I'll use your good student discount, right? You say, well, what's that got to do? What does my kid's grades got to do with their insurance? Because the studies show that if the kid makes good grades, they are a better risk for driving, right? So we have to look at this. When we have to follow the science, and that's the problem, is that we're being asked to follow the natural science. We also have to follow the actuarial science so that we're not offering discounts and we're not reducing rates when it doesn't make sense to do so. Okay, so that was the second half of your question. The first half of your question, we do a lot of advocacy on behalf of climate change, and we share we share the data. The challenge we have as an industry is our number one goal, our statutory, not just our goal, our statutory mandate is to pay claims when things go wrong. So we always have to look at solvency. And I know a lot of people want to say, why doesn't the insurance industry do more? We think our job is to tell you what the cost is, what it costs to insure this house, to insure this car, and then let the policy, the public policy, flow from that. Because otherwise what you're asking us to do is, not you personally, but what people are asking us to do is, we want you to advocate for this, and we want you to advocate for this change, and we want you to give these people discounts if they do X, Y, and Z. The data doesn't suggest that. The data doesn't support that. We have to look at the data in order to make those decisions. And we think our role is showing people what it truly costs to insure these properties influenced by this, and insure these cars. I would love a discount. I have a 10 kilowatt solar system on my house. I'd love a discount, right? I'm built to IBHS standards. I'd love a discount. I don't get that.
I think we have an online question.
I have one for you. It says, many insurance policies I see spend a lot of time with disclaimers of what they will not cover, and it seems this often includes a natural disaster or natural disaster type situations. What language should we look for in policies that will cover what happens in Texas as to oil and gas?
I'll be honest, I don't quite understand the question. Most policies do provide coverage for natural disasters, so I don't quite understand the part about oil and gas.
I will let you know if there's a follow-up, but I think it's asking if there are some kind of disasters related to oil and gas. What type of language should we look for in a policy?
Maybe there was an explosion or something.
Something along
Okay.
yeah,
Right.
that's my my interpretation.
So the first thing you want to do is you want to have those conversations with your insurance agent. Each policy in Texas is going to be different. We don't have a standard one-form policy, and so I'm a little leery to give guidance on this and give legal advice of what you should do. But if that is a concern you have, the first thing you should do is talk to your insurance agent or talk to your insurance company and say, if the local refinery down the street blows up and I have damage as a result of that, is that covered, right? We saw a lot of, remember a few years ago we had I think it was a fertilizer plant up in West, right? Fertilizer plant, okay. There were lots of claims paid as a result of that under homeowners policies, right? You need to call your insurance agent and ask is that covered in that scenario. And then what I would suggest, what I always do, if I have questions like that, I email the agent agent emails me back, and then I keep that email. So that if there's ever a question, oh, that's not covered. Well, that's not what your agent said. That's a problem for you now, insurance company, because I relied on what your agent told me.
I've always been curious about how people can build repeatedly in areas where there are mudslides and floods and fires, and they go back as soon as it's over and rebuild. Are these people being insured to do that?
Sometimes they are. There is tremendous pressure placed on your city council and your code enforcement people to allow them to rebuild in these areas, because they want to. If you're a city council person, you realize no one's going to rebuild in this area, and you lose all that tax base, and you have a lot of unhappy constituents now. That's my property. What am I going to do now? That's going to be a challenge. It's a political challenge for them. From our perspective, yes, it is challenging when you build back, and it's one thing to build back, right? If you build back and say, okay, I know a wildfire just came through here, maybe we need to use a different construction method. Maybe we need to use more stucco and less wood. Maybe we need to have defensible space and not have the forest right up to our windows. We need to do those things. The challenge is when you rebuild the same way over and over again. And that's what we see oftentimes after a tornado or after a hurricane. So the answer to your question is oftentimes yes. Understand there's also political pressure on our industry to provide those people with insurance. anytime we build in places that are prone to natural disasters, we always have secondary and tertiary downstream effects, just like the ones you just described, right? So, again, to answer back to this young lady's question, our job is to tell you what it costs. It is the public policymaker's job to decide, is this the course we really want to take?
Go here and then. Oh, wait, sorry, I did say there'd be an online question next. And
Okay.
then here.
Yep. So next question from online. Going back to oil and gas, are insurance rates higher in areas where there is fracking?
That I couldn't tell you. I know that, particularly in Oklahoma a few years ago, companies, if they wanted to stop writing earthquake insurance, had to file certain documents with the Oklahoma commissioner as a result of that, because they became very clear that as the price of energy caused the earthquakes, right? As the price of energy goes up, you have more earthquakes. Price of energy goes down, you don't have any earthquakes. What's that got to do with it? Well, it's because of the deep water injection, the wastewater injection from fracking. You inject it, causes an earthquake. Once we figured we were comfortable saying that publicly, and there's a lot of political pressure not to say that, then it was a lot easier for us to have a candid conversation about fracking and the impact it has on earthquakes. So, again, I can't really speak to the Texas market specifically, a specific policy. If you have concerns, I'm always going to tell you, go back and talk to your insurance agent. And if you're concerned about, hey, if there's a earthquake because of fracking, is that covered? Some policies provide earthquake coverage. Some policies provide it as an endorsement that you have to go purchase. You need to have those conversations with your insurance agent.
I'm wondering how, since you did it, how one goes about getting a home built under IBHS standards, because I can picture getting pushback from contractors and builders.
We interviewed 7 builders, and I would explain to them and I would hand them a flyer, one-page flyer, say, hey, we want to do this. Most of them looked at me like I wanted to put a UFO landing pad in my backyard. Like, why would you want to build above code? I mean, code's good enough. And so the interesting thing about this, and I appreciate that question, because the interesting thing about this was we landed on a builder who said, I don't know, but this looks easy enough, and it's not that hard. I mean, I don't know anything about building, but it's literally longer nails and a few more straps. That's it. I mean, there's nothing to it from a building standpoint. And about 3/4 of the way through the process, the builder comes to us and says, we're starting to understand this now. We kind of like this. And my builder, and I don't, how are we doing on time? I don't want to talk too long. Okay. Our builder said, we really like this. And what their experience was that the reason people don't ask for it, because they don't know to ask for it. They want the cool media room. They want the slick, fancy kitchen counters. I assure you that I don't watch those home and garden shows. I don't watch them, but the ones where they go in a house and flip it or flop it or buy it or burn it or whatever those shows are, where they do that thing. If those people would say, "Oh, by the way, we're going to do IBHS in this house, it's going to cost 2%, and when the tornado runs through here, your house is going to be safe," every person watching that network would go to their spouse and say, "I want that in our next house," because it's cheap.
So my question is, because you say that your job is not to tell the insurers, the people you insure, best practice. Why is that not best evidence-based practice to do IBHS? Why is it not? And why is it so hard to make it commonplace? Or just to educate people who, like us, are buying houses so that we can do exactly what you're saying. Right. Why is it not
There's
commonplace?
a lot of it is we do promote this.
I've never heard of it
Right.
till today.
It's getting through the static is the best way I would describe it, because realtors, we try. Realtors don't understand it, right? I'm a realtor. I've sold houses. I can say this. A lot of realtors don't understand this. The builders don't want to do it. The mortgage, the appraisers don't know how to appraise it. That's the challenge we've had, right? And we talk about this, and we talk about this, and we talk about this, and we struggle to get traction. So one of the things that you can do as you have these conversations is, if you're going to build a house, say, I heard this guy talk about IBHS and that a bunch of volunteers from Habitat for Humanity built a house on a beach. They got run over by a hurricane, it survived, and the ones that weren't built to that standard didn't. I want that for my house. And that part of it is just me coming to events like this and talking about it. We would love for one of you to come up with a solution to figure out how to make that more prevalent. We struggle.
All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Draw the circle,